back in virtual reality. I just wanted to do a quick video on this fascinating book by Professor Ruddiman. I guess it's called the Ruddiman hypothesis. But this first was published like 10 years ago, and it got reissued with a afterword. He's retired now, so he's a professor emeritus. But it's got some cool graphs that I just wanted to... Let's see if I can hold the phone and... the phone is focusing, so that's exciting. Published by the prestigious Princeton University Press. I was just in the grocery store with the University of Minnesota editor of their press. I've never talked to him. Okay, 2005, so 20 years ago. And they got reissued. So let me see if I can cruise along. So basically, his argument is that, I probably already did a video on this, but he goes over human evolution, and see what happened is we made axes out of flint about 10,000 years ago. We had rudimentary plows and axes, and so I don't know if this is from ice cores. That's probably from ice cores. Okay, so first you get the natural variability of the Milankovitch cycles, which everybody knows about. Even if they don't believe in global warming, you can say, oh, it's just a Milankovitch cycle. And the Milankovitch is the out of roundness of Earth's orbit, and then the tilt of the planet from the moon hitting it, what became the moon. And so that's the eccentricity, and so that elliptical shape of the orbit, it's about 3 million miles closer to the sun in one part of its orbital path. Over long time scales, you get a cycle of 100,000 years. So that changes where the sun or the Earth's orbit becomes perfectly circular on rare occasions. So that's pretty interesting. The changes in eccentricity are more irregular than the changes in the tilt of the planet. The second aspect is the Sun-Earth precession, which is the wobble based on the tilt. Yeah, so we know that's like every 25,000 years. Okay, 22,000 years. Okay, so eccentricity and precession work together to determine the solar radiation. So anyway, so that's your Milankovitch cycle. Also here he's combining the 22,000 year cycle and the 100,000 year cycle. Alrighty. So, yeah, kind of complicated there. That's not what I wanted to show you. So then he gets into here's Milankovitch right here. Milankovitch. So he's going over the whole history of the ice ages, radiocarbon dating. Yeah, so you can learn a lot of science in here if you want. The oxygen isotopes 18 and 16. Yeah, it's complicated. So large ice sheets appear first nearly 2.75 million years ago, melted at the 41,000 cycle of the orbital tilt. Alright. Until about 9 million years ago. Since that time, it would be 800,000 years. The major cycle of the ice sheet changes in a 100,000 year cycle. Right. Oh, interesting. Well, okay, so yeah, so we can learn more details if you wanted to. And then, so basically, we're coming up to the exciting part of the book. Okay, orbital changes control the monsoon cycles. All right. Okay. See, I didn't know that. I'm learning as I'm making the video. I thought I read this already, but greater moisture 9,000 years ago. Okay, so this is where he's getting into the what's natural versus what's caused by humans. So the orbital monsoon tracks with the methane. Okay, so moving right along. The plot thickens. Stirrings of Change, Chapter 6. So, 12,000 years ago, we start developing farming. And that's when the plot changes. Recent work by ecologists show that large mammals are brought to the point of extinction surprisingly quickly because large mammals reproduce slowly. Right, that makes sense. So I think this is a 20-year-old book, but they've proven that it's a combination of climate change and hunting. I think I might have done a video on a recent blog post on that. They've done fascinating research on the bison. Somebody was asking me about the bison, and so they've basically proven that it's a combination of global warming and hunting. End of the ice age, but actually, well, it wasn't just hunting, but Okay, so I almost forgot about the graph I was trying to get to. And here he's getting into the development of farming, domestication of plants, and the Fertile Crescent, how it spread into Europe by 8,000 years ago. It was spread all through most of Europe already. That's Europe, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So, just going to focus on the graphs. Okay, so the natural methane tracks with the solar radiation until farming really kicks in 5,000 years ago. And then all of a sudden methane kicks up because of farming 5,000 years ago. So that's the first evidence of how farming is causing global warming, because the increase in methane. A lot of it's from rice farming. Rice farming was only half as efficient in 1950. So that's like half of the methane gap. Anyway, I'm slowly getting to here's the graph I wanted to get to. So this is the really fascinating graph. He's like, if you look at the ice age cycles, the CO2 maximizes based on the solar radiation change. So you have a temperature increase, and then when you have minimum ice, so right before you have the minimum ice, the CO2 maximizes, which makes sense because the CO2 would cause the temperature increase, which would then cause the ice to be at a minimum. So he says that happens for every ice age. When the CO2 maximizes, it's right before the minimum ice. CO2 maximizes right before the minimum ice. But in the last interglacial period of the 100,000 year cycle, so this is 100,000 years, 100,000 years, 100,000 years. So the CO2 maximizes right before the minimum ice. So then the CO2 starts going down, just like it does all the other cycles. It goes down. But in our case, the CO2, all of a sudden, when farming kicks in big time, the CO2 just starts climbing and climbing and climbing instead of going down. Every other cycle for the 100,000 years, it's gone down. But now, all of a sudden, it goes up in the past, like 6,000 years. Because this is a 10,000 year demarcation. So, very fascinating. So then he's like, the natural trend of CO2 would have been to go down. But in the last 8,000 years, so 6,000 BCE, the CO2 went up. And it started before the end. The minimum ice would have kicked in based on the natural solar radiation cycle, causing CO2 to peak, and then it gets warmer and warmer because the CO2 peaked, and then the ice's minimum would have been happened 8,000 or 6,000, 4,000 BCE, because that's 6,000 years ago. 4,000 BCE, but instead the CO2 was already climbing 6,000 BCE when farming had already been well established around the world because it was all based on deforestation. So then he starts getting into the deforestation and what would have caused it. And he says he's got all the evidence that because the farming really increased worldwide, by the deforestation just kept increasing. So in Europe, it was already well deforested by like 3000 BCE. And since China and India had much larger population than Europe, then it makes sense that they would have been even more deforested. And so there you go. That explains why human-caused global warming actually started when farming and it's not just CO2, but it's also methane. And so anyway, that's the core argument of the book. I'll just leave it at that. I think there's one more graph orange. Yeah, so he's comparing CO2 and methane right there. So I think and then he's saying this indirect human effect is when you get the ice melting, and then that causes even more CO2 to be released. So yeah, I think he's proven his point. So I don't think it's a hypothesis. I think it's well proven. But they're trying to claim it's not well proven, but I don't think, they've done a lot of research in the past 20 years that even strengthens his claim. And he gets into epidemics and how that affects the CO2 release because you don't have as much farming. Oh yeah, I think this is the CO2 from pandemics. Yeah. Oh, let's see. It's interesting. So it caused the temperature to go down when you had pandemics. Very fascinating. Let's see. He gets into ice melting on Greenland. Oh, he's got a lot in here. Here we go. So the natural trend. So this is glaciation would kick in again based on the temperature. So the temperature should have been going down based on the ice age cycle and the solar radiation and Milankovitch effect. But it didn't. It's just stayed high, as high as it was when the Holocene started. And yeah, and then it this is where it's gone up now, so it's even higher than the natural trend of the peak of the ice ages. But of course it's gone up a lot higher now since this book's 20 years old. But It's going to really spike soon with the indirect heating from the Arctic. Climate change and politics. All right, so this is a cool book. He did awesome research. Plows, Plagues, and Petroleum. So he's got the whole plague section in there. Ruddiman. I think I emailed him. I didn't get a response back, but he's like, I think he's definitely in his 80s now, I think.